Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tucker, do you get a sense that they have a true rapport, that there is a relationship, a trust that could go deep enough? Because maybe it's a relationship that is required in order to circumvent all the institutional barriers to North Korea actually walking back from the precipice. Do you have a sense that it's sincere?
Oh, I think it is. I mean, it's certainly sincere on Trump's part. I mean, it's absolutely sincere. You know, he's totally unembarrassed to say, I kind of like Kim. You know, KJU, as they call him here. I kind of like him. You know, I mean, whatever you think of that, there's never been a president who's been willing to be that blunt. And I think it's heartfelt. I don't think he has any reason. I mean, he's not an admirer of the atrocities he's committed, obviously, but Trump thinks he's a competent, scrappy guy, which he is, and he's very young, and it can't be easy to hold on to third generation power in a country like that, where the ruling class is filled with 80-year-old generals, and you've got a lot of relatives. I mean, it takes a pretty hard man to keep a hold on power in a place like North Korea. So I think Trump respects his toughness. He says that. I think that's all real. What's Kim's motive in this? I mean, my sense, again, this is, just pop psychologizing, but just standing there for an hour watching, I think he was probably a little bit overwhelmed by Trump, who towers over him and who is a very large man. I mean, you're going to forget that. But standing next to Kim, I mean, he seemed to kind of dominate him, and there is a kind of magnetism and real aggression to Trump. So it didn't feel exactly like peers. It felt like, maybe an older brother, younger brother kind of situation. That's part of it. But I also think that there are real national interests here. And the main one is getting out from underneath some of these sanctions, which, makes it really hard for, to govern a country.
Tucker, just one thing that's the type of thing that does make some people nervous, though. President Trump recently made a comment about having a certain type of good chemistry with Kim Jong-un. And that may be true, but when you're talking about someone who has been responsible for so many human rights abuses, does he run a risk with that kind of language of A, coming off to Kim Jong-un like he's pandering to him to an extent, or B, upsetting the American public that elected a president that they want to stand firm and be tough on those human rights violations and stand firm on American principles, which exist in virtually complete contrast to how the North Korean regime is run?
Yeah, I mean, there's no defending the North Korean regime, which is a monstrous regime. It's the last really Stalinist regime in the world. It's a disgusting place, obviously, and so there's no defending it. On the other hand, you got to be honest about what it means to lead a country. It means killing people. Not on the scale that the North Koreans do, but a lot of countries commit atrocities, including a number that we're closely allied with. So, I'm not a relativist or anything, but it's important to be honest about that. And it's not necessarily a choice between, the evil people and the great people. It's a choice most of the time between the bad people and the worst people. That's just kind of the nature of life and certainly the nature of power. And I do think that's how the president sees it. He's far less sentimental about this stuff, and maybe I think more realistic about it. And I don't agree with everything that Trump says, but this is one thing I do agree with. Mm-hmm. There is a kind of Samantha Power, dorm room, like, oh, they're so mean. And it's kind of silly and stupid and not helpful. Like, in the end, what matters is what's good for the United States. And you deal with bad people a lot of the time in order to help your own country. And that's kind of the way I think Trump sees it.
It is Monday, the 1st of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right. Another one of those weekends, eh? Had a little picnic at the DMZ? Well. I guess they exchanged some love letters. Maybe the Iranians ought to get in on the game, too. Send a love letter. You'll be able to manufacture some more of what you need to make your nuclear reactors go reacting on a nuclear capacity. Okay, that's what we got going for us. And even more, I had the celebration of life for my son over the weekend, yesterday, Sunday, and a little over 100 people showed up through the course of the event, and it was a potluck and a barbecue. It was really fun. It was at the Kaiser Lions Club, and a fairly rustic-looking place, log cabin styling, more like a lodge. And big grounds, lots of pretty trees, conifers, by the way, because we are in Oregon after all. And had a bit of music, a nice video scroll, reminiscences. I took part in the structured sort of speech period, and it was lovely. Bittersweet, but lovely. And 6 months to the day from when he passed, and his friends put that together. Thank you, friends. His mom and I attempted to, we looked at a few places, but really our heart wasn't in it. It was hard. It's like, we'll do this later. As I've expressed in previous podcasts and broadcasts too. So, I don't know if it was necessarily a send-off. It was, I don't know. It still felt like mourning someone lost at sea. That's what it feels like to me. There's this hope that somehow they might materialize, like on the shore. And it won't be the case because, I just know. But it has that feeling in a sense. Like, if you believe it, it might happen. Wow, is that a step towards going insane? I don't know. What is sanity and what is not? Who really knows? Well, there are people who have codified it, and they have it in a book. So we got that going for us, which is nice. So let's tether ourselves to the rational world. And what better way to do that than to immerse ourselves in politics? Wow. So, Ivanka, I don't know. Is Ivanka really a human being? There's a video of her on social media in which the question is asked, why is she talking like a robot on a low battery? And she was at the G20. Very frightening. Very frightening. And trying to interject herself into a conversation with Theresa May and Macron, and there was I believe the French foreign minister. I forget what capacity she is, but there is no face of what the hell is this person doing here, and oh my, can I just there's no face like that except from a French woman of a certain age. The disdain, she did everything but did the tisk tisk, There's a sort of breathy inhale that one does when they're disgusted, I think, or well, in maybe it's just in Paris, because Paris is a world unto itself. And you've been in France, they'll tell you. Both sides. People outside in the provinces will tell you Paris is an entity unto themselves, and Paris will too. Say, of course we are. We are the center of the universe. And if you've spent some time there, you will come to believe it. You will. So I believe the French foreign minister, but I'm not so certain. Regardless, I've seen her on the stage and speaking before. She was not happy. I mean, the daughter, could you imagine Chelsea Clinton doing that? And Chelsea has chops. I mean, she has a PhD. And at least, so she knows from what she can speak. But Chelsea would never have interjected herself in a situation like that because, well, that's nepotism. She doesn't have any official capacity in the government by mere deign of being the daughter. But in this family, it is. Okay. Well, seems like there's tens of millions, almost about 60 million from last count, that thinks that's just perfectly okay. Perfectly okay. All right. And it seems to be happening again. Trump came on today and said, I don't need to woo swing voters. I can do it with my base. Oh, you mean since you spoke with Vlad, he said, don't worry, we'll take care of it again. Okay. It's not going to be in the same 3 states and counties in which they were able to swing the electoral election last time. It's going to be some different ones this time. Same strategy, different location. Idea is to figure out where they're going. I would use probably football strategy. But I don't know. Maybe Vlad's going to use a soccer strategy. Maybe. Now, they're both football, but a little different, as we know. So, I think I'd go with a football strategy, okay? And they're gonna try to throw into the flats. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So keep an eye on that. Mueller's going to testify on the 17th, so that's in just a couple of weeks. And already the Republicans are getting ready to take him down. That's odd, because I thought he was one of them. I mean, them being a Republican. Of course, Eisenhower was a Republican as well. But if you didn't know he was Eisenhower, you would have called him a socialist. If you're a Freedom Caucus Tea Party Republican now. Because that's what the Birchers said then, and that's what the Tea Party Freedom Caucus are now. Birchers. Once you wrap your head around that, it all makes sense because it's all nonsense. And now they seem to be running the show, and everything that was foretold, even from the Republican side, about what would happen is happening. How's that economy doing? Well, they do keep saying the stock market's doing great, but that's great if you own stock. All right. But if you're in the stocks, you're fighting wildfires, and you're picking grapes, and you're baling hay, and you're bringing in the corn as prison slave labor now. Mm-hmm. They just can't get rid of slavery. They just cannot quit it. If that's the way capitalism works, maybe we don't want it. Really? Please. Are we going to go back to that? Apparently, there's about 60 million people who think that that's perfectly okay. Perfectly okay. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, since that was Tucker Carlson in the top, with his jaundiced, cynical eye? Surmising? I don't know. I don't know if it's surmising. I think he just basically bared the soul of the modern Republican Party. Leading means killing people. Okay? So, I don't know. Maybe we're going to see a spectacle of reporters getting their heads lopped off on, TV for everyone to see. Maybe. I mean, the reporters all do say if there's one thing that Trump knows how to do, it's put on a show. Wow. Yeah, let's sit in the DMZ and put on a show. Okay. Oh, I heard that he's actually put in the specific and precise order to run tanks in the D.C. Mall. Tanks! For his 4th of July Dear Leader Fete. Wow. I'm telling you, the Trump 2020 flag's flying above the stars and stripes. There's a new sheriff in town, and things are a little bit more important in certain quarters and not so important in others. You know, like democracy. That's not so important anymore. Okay, well, what's else here? What else is in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, you know, I kind of took the day off or the days off over the weekend, and it's usually a day off from doing the show, but from, you know, not really doing much of the radio except what I had put in place. Now I got to get back into the swing of things. Well, ICE arrested an immigration activist just hours after he recited a poem criticizing the agency. Wow, that's great. You know, Victor Yara, some people call him Jara, he was killed for writing poems and singing songs that were critical of Peru. DC's time-honored Independence Day traditions are being squeezed to the side for the sake of Trump's unquenchable thirst for self-aggrandizement. Yeah, he's going to get tanks on the D.C. Mall. And following up on the failed GOP tax scam, the White House wants to give another tax cut to the rich and bypass Congress to do it. It's the only way. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where snipers shot at least 5 civilians and 3 Sudanese paramilitary soldiers as tens of thousands marched in the capital Khartoum, demanding a return to civilian rule. And called hotter than Death Valley, wildfires burned large swaths of France and Spain as record temperatures killed almost a dozen people in Germany. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who is going to Netroots Nation in just a few days. Very, very soon. And, I should also mention there is an art expo coming up on the 4th in Daily Coast, so stay tuned for that. Yours truly has a few photographs and poems included in this art expo. And I got to tell you, there's some masterful art and poetry and other things at that expo. So do check it out. It'll be up at noon East Coast, so that makes it 9 a.m. on the West Coast on July 4th. So I'll remind you, even on the day, because we're going to do a show on July 4th as well. Hey, it's Resistance Radio. Even more important now, huh? More than ever. All right, so thank you, Kelly, for monitoring the chat room link. And once again, she will be at Netroots Nation. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your generous contribution, which could be really as if you could afford a latte or an espresso type coffee drink once a month and send those proceeds our way, that's a lot of generosity, because we're able to stretch those dollars and resist as the founders originally intended. Way back at the founding of this whole great experiment. And you can figure out what that is. So, all kidding aside, we're unable to do this without you, and your generosity is greatly appreciated. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and rather pithily, I might add. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Also, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. And then in that scramble period, that's the professional term, the 10 minutes that you have before showtime. In that scramble period, the links are mostly put up on social media, so look for it there if you're not going to go to Daily Kos. And if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Every single one. Okay. Well, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of Think Progress by Rebecca Intralgo. A Bakersfield college student was arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement 36 hours after he recited a poem criticizing the agency at a public event, according to the ACLU Foundation of Southern California. In mid-May, Bello appeared before the Kern County Board of Supervisors during a public meeting to discuss the sheriff's office interactions with ICE and read aloud his poem entitled, Dear America. Well, you can't do that. You're brown. How dare you? You don't look like an American. God. If I hear another person say, well, it's not like us. He's not like us. Yeah, he sure isn't, is he? I don't know if you're like us. And I don't know if I want to be you. Well, back to the article at hand. I'm here to let you know we want to feel safe, whether we're brown, Asian, or black, he said. We don't want your jobs. We don't want your money. We're here to work hard, pay taxes, and study. Well, apparently to the Bakersfield police, that's a threat, and that's just going a little too far. 36 hours later, Bello, who is also a father and a farm worker, awoke at 6:30 in the morning to ICE agents at the door of his home in Bakersfield, California. The ACLU, in a legal petition on behalf of Bello in San Francisco's district court, argued that Bello's First Amendment rights were violated with his arrest, and Bello was being held on a $50,000 bond. The close succession of these two events strongly indicates that ICE acted in retaliation against Mr. Bello for his speech expressing views against the agency's actions, you think? Well, the ACLU wrote in court documents, but not the you think part. I like to add that. If left unaddressed, ICE's actions will chill immigrant speakers from sharing criticisms of the agency at the very same time that it's escalating aggression and increasing use of detention at the center of public debate. The ACLU also alleges an ICE officer told Bello, we know who you are and what you're all about. Yeah, because they have access to all those fusion centers. You know, the ones that are able to be used by cops in an interagency capacity and spy on the very citizens they're supposed to protect. Well, you know what they mean when they say protect and serve. They mean protect the police and the powers that be from us and serve their masters at the same time. That's what they're there for. Jesus. I mean, they didn't call the original cops slave patrols for nothing. Oh yeah, we're gonna have some like walking patrols around, the countryside. Sometimes they rode horses. Well, this is not Bello's first encounter with ICE. In August of 2018, he and his brother Oscar Bello Reyes were released from the agency's custody on a $10,000 bond after spending 3 months in detention because ICE claimed they were linked to street gangs because they're Mexican-looking. They're Hispanic. Mexican-looking. I love that. Well, in the parlance of the right wing, let's be clear. Bello has denied any involvement in gangs, claiming the agency mixed him up with another person. The neighborhood he grew up was known for its gangs, but the Bello brothers have no criminal record. In late January of 2019, Bello was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol. He pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 3 years probation. Well, he should have ran for Congress in Florida as a right-wing Looney Tune, and he might have been able to get the district right next to Matt Gaetz now, couldn't he? You know, that guy who has driven under the influence of alcohol many, many times. When Bello was arrested in May, he was placed in a holding cell, handcuffed until around 3 p.m., according to court documents. Officers ignored pleas to remove the restraints so he could use the bathroom. Eventually, he had no choice but to wet himself, lawyers wrote. He remained in those soiled clothes for hours. Pike of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Washington, D.C.'s 4th of July celebrations have played out roughly the same way for decades. This year, though, the long-standing security, logistics, and crowd management practices on the National Mall are being recrafted in the image of Donald Trump. The nation's birthday party won't be a first-come, first-serve egalitarian GOP in 2019. It'll have tiered, ticketed entry, some form of militaristic performance art, and a speech by the divisive and twitchy current occupant of the country's highest political office. Trump's less-than-tickety-boo plans include cordoning off a special VIP area stretching from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to halfway down the length of the reflecting pool. Because do you know how many anchor baby Russian moms are going to fill that place up? And they're going to bring their hubbies, too. You know, the oligarch gangsters that have, a lot of investment in destroying this democracy. The velvet rope ethos is an essential part of the gaudy, ostentatious luxury image Trump long ago made into his personal brand. Yeah, we called it dictator chic. But it's alien to D.C.'s fireworks night, which has traditionally been a partisanship-free occasion. Nobody seems to know what exactly to expect, according to the Washington Post reporting. The ongoing shifts to what have been established security and crowd control protocols have left officials in the district and some federal agencies confused about logistics as basic as what metro stops and roads might be open or closed, and for what period, and how many fireworks displays will launch. I suppose if you're going to have a military parade, you want to have a military flyover. Wouldn't it be odd if some sort of, I don't know, aircraft with Cyrillic on the tail might appear? Would they have Cyrillic on the tail? I think they would. Trump famously promised to drain the swamp once he got to D.C. What he meant was drain it of all the mud people. That's what the swamp means. I mean, he doesn't mean D.C. lobbyists. Those are his friends. He means anybody who might get in the way. And he's going to start with all the brown people who happen to be mud people because that's what white supremacists think they are. They're not human. The real people who live and work in this city, meanwhile, will have one of their old reliable diversions swallowed by the Trump circus. The administration's underexplained changes to the Independence Day fireworks show include the complete closure of one major commuter bridge between the district and Virginia, a temporary shutdown of air traffic into and out of the city's nearest airport, and still unspecified military hardware displays. You mean like tanks on the National Mall? Trump's taste for the lavish hasn't just inconvenienced people who live near the city he's borrowing, it's also shrunk the actual tangible resources that city has available to do things for people. I say that's a feature, not a bug. The extra security measures required on Thursday by Trump's decision to inject himself into the festivities will reportedly force the city to dip into its emergency fund, and they will never be reimbursed. My God, he's giving Nuremberg rallies as campaign events, and he still hasn't paid the cities that he's had those at for the security that they provided. Though Trump has branded the politicized, militarized version of the national fireworks display as a salute to America, the way he talks about the plans indicate it's really about gratifying his own ego. Major fireworks display, entertainment, and an address by your favorite president, me, he tweeted in February. Of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast cookbook and speakeasy. The Trump administration is considering a plan to once again cut taxes for the ultra-wealthy, following up on the failed GOP tax scam. The White House is developing a plan to cut taxes by indexing capital gains to inflation. Bloomberg noted that the plan would largely benefit the wealthy. Well, you know, when it's indexed to inflation, you can certainly be assured none of those people will have to decide whether to eat the cheap brand of cat food or the expensive brand of cat food, because that won't be part of their menu. Believe me. Trump would enact the giveaway through a rule or executive order bypassing Congress, where it would most likely face massive opposition from Democrats. And maybe in the parlance of the Republicans, it's Democrats. Emphasis on the rat, because that's how they think. Investors would see their tax bills cut when they sell assets like stock or real estate. If enacted, the plan would be overwhelmingly biased in favor of the top 1%. Bloomberg noted they would receive 86% of the benefit. And it's going to be sold as some sort of, you won't be able to sell your home because of all the taxes. You're an investor when you sell your home. Yeah, well, they're not talking about selling your home. Okay, they're not talking about that kind of real estate. They're talking about the kind of real estate that benefits Donald Trump. I would suggest that people license their name to put on their property, and then when they move, you can tell them, okay, pay me to take it down. Trump's plan would reduce tax revenue needed for vital government operations by $102 billion over a decade. Wow. He really does want to get our GDP down to around Russia's or Italy's. Ron Wyden of Oregon, a senator, of course, our senator, my senator, described the idea as a plot to continue looting the Treasury. He noted that it was an indication that Republicans must be nervous about Trump's re-election chances if they're considering using executive power to enact the changes. Wyden said Trump's primary goal is to further slash taxes for himself and his wealthy political allies, and said cutting taxes this way would be plainly illegal. The Republican tax scam passed in 2017 was heavily biased in favor of the super-rich and has been an absolute failure. Republicans, led by Trump, said that cutting taxes for major corporations and the rich would stimulate major economic growth, but it didn't. He took their business overseas, like Harley-Davidson. The capital gains cut idea shows that instead of learning from his mistakes, Trump is considering doubling down on them. He wants the richest Americans to get a break, even if it hurts the most vulnerable. I would add, because it hurts the most vulnerable. Okay, that brings us to our break, which we better take, because it's getting late, isn't it? And when we get back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, new category of movie, the Zomcom. Early on in The Dead Don't Die, we're informed that the story will end badly. Indeed, those very words are spoken by police officer Ronnie Peterson, played with deadpan panache by Adam Driver to Chief Cliff Robertson, and equally deadpan Bill Murray. In fitting Jim Jarmusch fashion, the fourth wall is broken early on, letting us all know that the main characters are aware they're actually in a movie. Set in the fictional Pennsylvania town of Centerville, taken from Frank Zappa's 200 Motels, the comedy/satire focuses on local law enforcement officials played by the aforementioned Driver, Murray, and Chloe Sevigny, who join forces with other locals to battle the undead. The plot launcher here is polar fracking, which changes the Earth's rotation, causing the sun to shine at night and, of course, the dead to rise. In addition to the trio of cops, there's a strange Irish funeral home owner named Zelda, played by a swaggering Tilda Swinton, who's somehow an expert at taking out zombies, but alas, can't stay long enough to save the town. Without spoilers, Zelda's exit in the hands of any other director would be downright absurd, but Jarmusch manages to make it work. While the movie is a spoof on the zombie genre, it's also a satire about the addictions of modern life, with a splash of Trump-era commentary. The undead hilariously mutter about the things they coveted in life, ranging from coffee and Chardonnay to cars and trucks to Wi-Fi. A local homeless hermit and narrator, played by Tom Waits, wraps the picture with a wonderful pointed soliloquy to this effect. The Dead Don't Die is as funny and witty a movie as it is star-studded, and succeeds because it doesn't take itself too seriously. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Sharing a meal is a standard first step in the mating rituals of many mammals. But Egyptian fruit bats take splitting an entree to a whole other level. Because males that allow females to take the food right out of their mouths are repaid with reproductive rights, and are more likely to sire offspring with their favorite female fruit finaglers. And that's according to a study in the journal Current Biology. A couple years back, researchers noticed that in fruit bat colonies, some bats forage for food, while others simply snatch it from the foragers' mouths.
And there are different hypotheses for explaining this.
Yossi Yavel of Tel Aviv University has studied these bats for years. Well, maybe the scroungers were relatives, he says, or maybe they're just socially dominant bullies.
What we observed is that mostly scroungers are females.
Well, that got the researchers thinking about something of great importance to most animals: reproduction.
Specifically, we are wondering whether females might then mate with males that provide them with food. So this was a hypothesis, the sex for food hypothesis that we tested.
Yavel and his colleagues monitored the interactions among bats in their colony for more than a year, and they checked the paternity of the baby bats that were born. What they found is that females were more likely to make babies with those males that provided free meals. But Yavel says that the process is not strictly transactional.
So sometimes they took a lot of food from a specific individual, but did not mate with him. What's important is what we think is the bond between the two. So if this individual is the main provider of the female, then the probability that they will later mate increases.
That means that offering free lunch is no guarantee for an amorous male, but it does up his odds. And unlike human males, bat boys clearly learn that it's in their romantic interest to chew with their mouths open. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC. For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The Supreme Court has ruled that a towering 40-foot-tall Christian cross may remain on public land in Blandesburg, Maryland. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. It's hard to reconcile this recent Supreme Court decision called American Legion versus American Humanist Association with the First Amendment guaranteeing a wall of separation between church and state. The Supreme Court prior to this has consistently ruled that the Establishment Clause prohibits any governmental action that favors one religion over another. There is, however, a silver lining. The Supreme Court's ruling was narrow and based on the facts and circumstances surrounding this particular monument, which is nearly 100 years old and evocative of what the court says is the particular symbolism singular to memories of World War I. Given that, there is a strong argument to be made in the future that this Supreme Court decision is not a license for government officials to erect or maintain new religious displays. Freedom of religion, that wall of separation between church and state, is a venerable right, but it is also a vulnerable right, a right that requires our attention and vigilance if it is to remain a pillar of democracy and freedom. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1983. That was the day that began a 3-year struggle by copper workers in Arizona. The contract for 13 unions in the mining towns that included Clifton and Morenci had expired. Many of the workers were Latino. The employer, Phelps Dodge, used every tactic they could to break the strike. The workers and their families were harassed, evicted from their homes, under constant police surveillance, and arrested. Even though the contract guaranteed continued medical benefits, the company stopped health care for those on strike. To make matters worse, the company brought in scabs to replace the striking miners. On August 19th, the governor of Arizona sent a massive military convoy, including tanks and helicopters, to the work sites. Despite this overwhelming show of force against them, the strikers persevered. The wives set up a free medical clinic and organized to provide food and other needs for the striking families. Soon they joined their husbands, fathers, and brothers on the picket lines. The women traveled to give speeches and raise money. Finally, after 3 long years of struggle, the workers in the mines, predominantly the scabs brought in by the company, voted to decertify the union, thus ending the strike. Barbara Kingsolver wrote a moving book on the struggle called Holding the Line: Women in the Great Arizona Mine Strike of 1983. In the preface of the book, she warns, "Watch your back, America. Take civil liberties for granted at your own risk. Trust in leaders who arrive into power by means of wealth and see who they protect when push comes to shove. What happened in Arizona could happen again, and it will, somewhere to someone. It will happen again and again if we do not open our eyes and believe what we see."
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 63 degrees. Oh my, it looks like we're going to be going up to a high of about 82. Overnight lows are going to be in the mid-50s to low 60s. Tomorrow will be in the low 80s to mid-80s with overnight lows staying the same. Winds are light and variable out of the west. Will be shifting out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, their usual clip. Shifting ever so slightly out of the northwest this evening. And continuing that clip as well. Oops, sorry about that. And tomorrow, it will be also continuing out of that direction and at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated at very high. The air quality index is good at 15 parts per million. The daytime UV index is very high at 9. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles and relative humidity is at 74%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 70 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 80 and partly cloudy. Rome is 92 and sunny. Kiev is 93 and fair. Kabul is 85 and fair. Hong Kong is 83 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 75 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia, 50 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California, 56 degrees, mostly cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York, is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A senior member of Sudan's military leadership said unknown snipers shot at least 5 civilians and 3 paramilitary soldiers yesterday Sunday as tens of thousands marched in the capital demanding a return to civilian rule. The deputy head of the Transitional Military Council did not say whether anyone died and gave no information on the gunmen or their affiliation during a short address on state TV. There were snipers shooting at people. They shot 3 members of the RSF and 5 or 6 citizens and we are upset and we want to get things under control, he said. And that was Dagalo, the commander of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The snipers who are shooting at people will be brought to justice, he added, and I'm sure they will.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Gus Trumpes and Joan Faust of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A 4-day heat wave across Western Europe that killed 7 people began to ease slightly yesterday, Sunday, as temperature alerts were cut back and wildfires slowly brought under control. Most of the fires that had broken out in Spain in recent days were stabilized, but firefighters were struggling to control a blaze in the central provinces of Toledo and Madrid that had burned more than 8 square miles since Friday. In the northeastern town of La Luminilla de Dona Godina, the temperature hit a scorching 108.3 degrees Fahrenheit. But 5 of Spain's 50 provinces were downgraded from extreme weather risk, leaving just 2 at the highest level with 31 on weather alert. In France, which experienced a national record of 114.6 Fahrenheit in the south on Friday, temperatures were set to fall gradually. You know, from 114 to 110. Do you really feel a difference? In Paris, a ban imposed on older cars to counter heat-related pollution was likely to be lifted on Monday today. Nevertheless, some 25 out of around 90 French administrative departments have restricted water use, not least for farmers. Jerome Despy, a wine producer in France's southwestern Hérault region, tweeted photos of shriveled grapes and complained of widespread damage. You can't make wine out of raisins. I've tried. Meteorologists say a weakening of the high-level jet stream is increasingly causing weather systems to stall and leading summer temperatures to soar. 5 of Europe's hottest summers in the last 500 years have happened in this century. The World Meteorological Organization said this week that the European heat wave was absolutely consistent with extremes linked to the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. In Frankfurt, 3,000 athletes took part in an Ironman endurance race despite the heat. Yeah, well, I suppose they should wear an iron suit and see what it feels like. In the women's event, race leader Tara True of the United States collapsed within a kilometer of the finish line of the closing marathon stage. True had already completed a 3.8 kilometer swim and a 185-kilometer bike ride, was carried off the course and had to be restrained by first aid workers concerned for her well-being because she wanted to finish the race, of course. At a post-race news conference, she said she was feeling better, but did not remember the final kilometers of the race. Addressing thousands of people in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis said he was praying for those suffering most from the heat wave, the sick, the old, construction workers, and those who had to labor outdoors. May no one be abandoned or exploited, he said. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. So we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. That's what we do. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.